Hello, and welcome to the Renewed Nurse Podcast. This podcast is all about nurse well-being, and it is presented to you from the Center for Nursing Excellence. I'm Melanie Houston, and I'm the Chief Nurse Executive for WVU Medicine, and I have with me...
Hi, my name is Allie Dempsey. I am a nurse working on 7 West at Ruby Memorial Hospital, and Melanie and I are your hosts on the journey to discover nurse well-being together. Melanie, last week we spoke with Joe Slavic. He was fantastic. He was from the Howard Long Wellness Institute. So tell me a little bit, what were your takeaways?
Well, first of all, they're doing some really cool things at Wheeling. I was super impressed, and as you said, Joe was awesome. You could tell he was a pro,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
He taught us a lot of lessons about doing a podcast that we picked up from him and we will use. But I also learned a lot about how they're incentivizing people and tips and tricks about taking someone with you, getting an accountability buddy.
Right.
What about you?
Right. I mean, it was definitely interesting to hear. Exercise is one of those things that not everyone fits into their life every single day. But Joe gave some, neat tricks. He definitely mentioned accountability and how we can have that buddy system and help each other out. So I think it was really nice to hear from Joe. I know he has a pickleball tournament coming up, so I think the nurses are going to be excited about that.
Yeah, he told us that on the side. So anybody who wants to do pickleball, you see Joe.
Yes, absolutely. But I'm excited to, share with you our next guest. Melanie, I'll let you introduce them.
Well, today we have Sarah Hollins from Camden, Clark, and Parkersburg. We're so excited to have you. And she's the Director of Behavioral Health at Camden Clark Medical Center. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Sarah, then we're going to jump in. Her experience with well-being and strategies have been used to create well-being and space in the workplace. Her background has been in behavioral health for over 20 years. And she started out as a therapist years ago in the United Summit Center's Crisis Stabilization Unit. And then she transitioned to a case manager and then helped to manage the program started in Camden Clark in 2007 with her behavioral health unit opened. Then she worked as the director of Fairmont Regional Medical Center's Geri Adult Outpatient Psych Services. Yep. And then she's been at Camden Clark for the 8 years as the program coordinator for the Schwartz Rounds Chair of the Workplace Violences. Just a few things that she's done.
Yes.
You sound busy.
Yes, very.
Lots of interesting work. We want to hear some about it.
Sure. So we typically go through kind of the podcast. We ask each other questions, go back and forth, and then we'll have a little discussion about it. We've recently been talking about how space kind of encompasses both that mental and physical well-being and kind of the tangible aspects of our life, whether or not we can change those things in the moment or if it's a long-term process. So I'll ask you first, what are your feelings and understanding on well-being?
So well-being really is just a state of happiness, health, and prosperity. So thinking about that, it's going to be uniquely different for all of us. And I think we really have to, in the past few years, it's been very popular, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a tendency for it to be commercialized a little bit. Buzzwords like self-care. And I think that inherently kind of puts some pressure on us. Are we matching what we're supposed to be doing? Are we going on those vacations? Are we doing all the things, especially what our social media shows us? So I think being intentional and knowing that it doesn't have to be anything grandiose. It's getting back to making sure that our basic needs are met and really identifying, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically, what brings us joy, what brings us happiness and health. So getting back to that, the basics.
Yeah, and I love that, what brings joy. And I've been thinking a lot about that because, that's what traditionally people think about. I'm going to get a mani and pedi. I'm going to go get a spa day. But really, it's the simple things. Yes. I mean, you can do that too, I guess, right?
Yes, but I think we need to be mindful when we're doing those things. If we're just going through the motions and we're not truly being intentional and saying, this fills my cup, this really fills me up, I feel rejuvenated, then we're just, what's the purpose then?
Right.
What brings value?
And I didn't really even equate that because, I like shopping at Marshall's by myself, seeing what I could buy. And when I think about that now, those, 15 minutes bring me a lot of joy.
Yes. Yeah.
How about you, Allie? Kind of what brings you joy?
I mean, I think a lot of the time everyone has something on their plate, whether it's kids at home, you know, going home to their husband maybe won't get off. My husband works crazy shifts, so maybe not until midnight.
Yeah.
And, you know, what are we going to make for dinner? I think those are just some of the questions that go through our mind throughout every single day, and taking that drive home and just kind of shutting everything off.
Sure.
So I think, you know, even from hearing those buzzwords like spa and, you know, getting a mani-pedi, things like that, kind of relates more to the women side of things.
Sure.
But then I think about my husband and I say, you know, what does he do for well-being? You know, what is the next step for him? Is he going to the gym? Is he going fishing? Like, just things like that. So it's always this hobby, and it's not necessarily 5-10 minutes of just relaxation or just shutting off.
Yes, I think sometimes just recognizing what your body might need. It might be something as simple as a nap, you know, and
just to turn it off.
Right, just to turn off that noise and to reset. So
so you seem to know a lot about it. What do you feel like brought you kind of to this place? What was the passion behind it?
Well, I think I have just wanted to help people from the time I can remember. I have always just thought about, you know, the kids, you know, think back to school, the kids that were getting in trouble. Like, I wanted to figure out why. I wanted to save them and show them like the right things to do. My teacher actually got a hold of my mom and was like, can you please explain to Sarah, like, when she's done with her tests, like, she can't just go over and give people the answers. And I'm like, why? You know, I'm helping. So I've always just naturally been a helper. I love figuring out how people operate, you know, what's behind the choices they make. And then two, my father, he was actually killed prior to me being born, and he was a drug addict. So knowing that growing up, his substance abuse issues, and just always wondering that what if there were more services? What if there were more supports? And I think that also helped kind of drive what I do today, because I just, you know, I want to help everybody. I love my patients. I love the people that I work with. And if I can be an ear, if I can be understanding, if I can get them to the right services, I absolutely will. So.
Wow. Thanks for sharing your story. That's brave of you to share this on the podcast.
Sure.
But you feel like a person who's open to sharing so people can learn.
Absolutely.
So can you tell us some innovative strategies that you've kind of thought about that people can use in the workplace? You know, when they're at work, you have a behavioral health unit, right?
Yes.
And I'm sure sometimes they don't always practice what they preach.
Right.
And so maybe you can share with us some ways to think about making space for well-being at work.
Sure. Well, when I'm walking down the halls, people probably think a lot of times I look crazy because I'm taking deep breaths and like blowing out, because I have to be intentional of like, okay, this is my time to like calm down. I can feel the stress. But I think for our staff, again, for our leaders, it's taking that time out, going and getting that bit of sunshine. How many of us leave work and it's like, oh my gosh, it's been 12 hours and I haven't seen the light of day. I don't even know what's going on outside.
We try to run out before the time change right now.
Right, right. So if you can take that lunch outside, if you can actively say, you know what, I've been in front of this computer for I don't know how long, I am going to get up, go down, get a cup of coffee, go check in with my work bestie, right? You know, call home. I think little things again, but we also have some really great programs that we're investing in at Camden, like Schwartz Rounds, Thrive. We try to remind our people about our EAP system. But for those of you that don't know about Schwartz Rounds, it was started back in the 90s when a gentleman up in Boston had terminal cancer. And he saw how hard the caregivers really worked for him to bring him that comfort in his last days. So his last dying wish was to create the Schwartz Center. And he really wanted to focus on creating that compassion for this caregiver. So what we do at Camden is we have hour-long discussions, and it can be on various topics. We've talked about COVID. We've talked about our first Code Blue, all sorts of things, where we have 3 panelists typically they share their story, but everybody in the hospital is invited. The outpatient clinics, it can be EVS, engineering, nursing, and it's really a space where we invite people to be vulnerable and to recognize that we truly are a community. We have shared experiences, and sometimes we're crying, sometimes we're laughing. It's a mixture of both, but it's really cathartic to be able to process some of those feelings and experiences we've all had. So,
yeah, as a nurse, I think a lot of nurses will ask, how can we incorporate we don't have necessarily Schwartz rounds at
Sure.
Ruby, but we have supporting you. And those are kind of some of the girls, they come up every single morning. They ask us how we're doing. And honestly, it makes you think about how are we doing? And it brings you right back to that joy part. Or are we enjoying our day? Are we already starting out just exhausted? And I think that's really important. So as far as like nursing, do you guys provide anything to the nurses? Is there any specific things that help them?
I think, creating that space, relieving people so they can take part in those activities is huge. I think, we have Vanderbilt where we're recognizing, people might just have bad days. Yeah. We're human, right? So having conversations, normalizing situations. And I think as leaders and, coworkers, really getting to know the people we're with and recognizing, hey, do you need a break? Let me take over so you can have some time. How can I support you?
Right. So. I think that's important. I mean, every single person has a story. Every nurse has something to go home to. Some nurses don't have anything to go home to. So I think that's important to recognize that we're all on the same team. And while we're at work, there has to be a way for us to, get through it and eventually find that joy.
Sure.
A couple of things I thought of when you brought up supporting you. It also makes you stop for a minute. Right?
Exactly.
It forces you to stop and think about how you're doing, but also to take a minute to talk to that peer, right, that has been trained. I really thought a lot about that. And the other thing you brought up that I've thought a lot about too is that everyone has a bad day.
Sure.
But if you have a habit of having a bad day, that's a different story, right? Yes. So I think we have to give grace to people when they have a bad day and understand that, as you said, sometimes people have a lot going on at home that we don't know about. And we, need to make the assumption and assume good intent. But, if someone's regularly having a bad day, we might need to have help for them, have a way to talk with people. And so I think there's a difference there. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. If it becomes a trend, obviously we need to intervene. But I think creating that psychological safety where staff can be their authentic selves. They can joke if they need to joke, because our jobs are very stressful. They're very tough. And sometimes you need that sense of humor to kind of push through the day. Or even, I have an open door policy. So if my staff need to come in and they need to vent, then it's a safe space for them to vent, right? Because we need to support and care for one another.
Definitely important. I couldn't agree with more. Honestly, I couldn't.
Well, you said psychological safety. And I think some of our listeners and viewers may not know what that means. We would hope that people understand it, but I think it's really important if you just talk about that for a little bit more.
Sure. I think it's just creating that safe space where people can speak up and talk about their feelings, talk about their thoughts, and it not be punitive, right? They're not going to get in trouble. But of course, we need to know our audience and we need to know where we're at. So that's why, if you want to come into my office or however, but I think too, just knowing that they can express themselves and have thoughts and ideas, and they're not going to instantly receive like defensiveness or, criticism for sharing. They can just really be themselves. So, and be open.
Well, that really ties us into our whole topic of our podcast was making space for wellness. And when I think about psychological safety, that's another way to make space.
Sure.
And so, there's a lot of definitions about making space for wellness. And I think that you really helped us today. So I so appreciate you coming from Camden Clark. We're trying to have people from all over the health system. And the one thing that we always do, we kind of decompress, right? And we say, how did this feel for you today?
I love it. I mean, I wish we had more time to talk about all the great things, but no, I think this is very important. And I think this was fantastic. So I hope people take something away and just are mindful, like take care of those basic needs, ask yourself, reevaluate, what is it that's going to get me through the day? What makes me happy? So
super helpful.
Yeah.
How about you, Ellie?
I
How are
agree,
you feeling
Melanie.
today?
I like that you said that we just need to give each other grace, and then also just learning to say no.
yes.
Unfortunately, saying no to that overtime shift is not an option sometimes because our bills are insane. But, just saying no and understanding that we all have boundaries. And sometimes we
Yes.
just cannot continue to keep doing what we're doing. Take a break. So you really helped me understand a little bit more about it. And I'm excited to hear from our next guest. We have a million guests on our show here, and I always get confused on the names. So I will tell you.
Take a look at your paper.
It is the chaplain from the Mary Babb Randolph Cancer Center. And we'll be talking with Reverend Devin Voigt. He's been doing some work with nurses, especially with complicated grief, especially after COVID as well. I think it kind of caused that generational shift of what to expect and what's exceptional. So,
Well, great.
Yeah.
That's exciting. We can't wait to meet him. So we will see you next week. To our audience, we appreciate you listening. We appreciate you watching. Give us lots of feedback. We want to hear how we're doing on this journey for wellness. We're learning as we go. We're having a lot of fun. And we're trying to make our guests not feel too nervous and share all the fun things that they're doing across the health system. As always, please email me with feedback. My name is Melanie Houston, the Chief Nurse Executive for WVU Medicine. I welcome your feedback and I love it via email. And how you contact me is Melanie, MELANIE .Houston, HEUSTON @wvumedicine.org. So thanks again and see you next time.
This podcast and video presentation were brought to you by the WVU Medicine Center for Nursing Excellence. For comments, questions, or suggestions, please email melanie.houston@wvumedicine.org with the subject heading Podcast Feedback. This program was executive produced by our Chief Nurse Executive, Melanie Houston, and developed and produced by me, Eric Small, with the Center for Nursing Excellence. Multimedia production and recording is by Chad Atkins. Our logo was designed by Carly Kale. We want to raise a special thanks to all of our partners in the marketing department at WVU Medicine for their work on this project, and to the nurses who dedicate so much time, effort, and care for the patients of WVU Medicine. Thank you.